U.S. Coast Guard. And there's a bunch of them here today. That's amazing. Admiral Moore was born in Ohio and raised in Alabama. He graduated from the United States Coast Guard Academy with a Bachelor of Science degree in Naval Architecture and Marine Engineering and was commissioned in May 1992. He received his Master's of Science degrees in Naval Architecture and Marine Engineering and a Master's of Business Administration from the University of Michigan in 1998. Rear Admiral Moore subsequently served in Portsmouth, Virginia, Washington, D.C., St. Petersburg, Florida, Honolulu, Hawaii, and Arlington, Virginia in numerous leadership positions. He went on to earn a Master of Science degree in National Resource Strategy and was then Chief of Office of Naval Engineering at Coast Guard Headquarters. His personal awards include 2 Legions of Merit, 4 Meritorious Service Medals, 2 Coast Guard Commendation Medals, the Navy Commendation Medal, and the Coast Guard Achievement Medal. He has been a registered professional engineer in the state of Michigan since 1999. Please welcome with me Rear Admiral Nathan A. Moore. We'll start with a simple apparatus. I've never had that happen before. That was great. We'll put that in from now on. We're going to do that every time. So. I also like the elevated podium. This is fantastic. So thank you all for coming here today. A lot of Coast Guard people here. I've met some of you already. I look forward to meeting many more of you afterwards. And we're certainly happy to represent, for me, on behalf of my boss, Vice Admiral Fred Midget, who commands Pacific Area in Alameda, California. I'm very happy to be here and honored to be here on behalf of the Coast Guard. What I'd like to do today is try to tie together some sea stories with some remembrances of the rest of the services and how the Coast Guard ties in with soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines, and the Merchant Marine as we do our job. So I'm going to see if I can pull that off. Obviously, I wanted to thank everyone for coming and for hosting us and for being part of this in the great state of Nevada. You don't get as a Coast Guard, what did I say? I did practice that with the lady in the hotel today, and I thought I had it. Yeah, maybe that's exactly right. She might have set me up. But we're really happy to be here, and anytime we can get into an interior state, a landlocked state, and we do have a Coast Guard, we actually do have a Coast Guard station on Lake Tahoe. Some of you may know that. But beyond that, we don't get a lot of chance to come in here and talk to you, so we're really happy to do that. It is a tough assignment, tough crowd already. That's okay. Wait till I get to the sea stories. You're gonna really either like them or hate them. So if you have the chance to go over and check out the helicopter, please do that. I wanted to thank the crew from Air Station San Francisco. These guys flew out here. That's one of our rescue workhorses, that A-65. We use those aircraft for all kinds of things. We actually use them for armed use of force, for counter-narcotics work too. That's what I've done in my career more often. We go down off the coast of Central and South America, and we shoot warning shots and disabling fire into small craft that are trying to run cocaine up into Mexico and try to get to the United States. While they're doing that, we had a case last night. Some of the ships that come right out of California here and other places on the West Coast go all the way down there. It's a couple thousand miles to get down there.
and get those guys out of the water. We roll down there with helicopters like that, and 415-foot ships with search and rescue, or with radars and fixed-wing aircraft overhead, and they're out there in little small boats with outboard engines. So it's not fair, and we get them every time. And the guys like to shoot them. Okay, I'm way off the script, so as my aide would say, figure it out, get back to where you're supposed to be. All right, as General Burke said, every generation out here has fought battles and wars that have defined them, and we're no different today. There are battles like Concord, Yorktown, New Orleans, Lake Erie. We fought for an undivided nation at Fort Sumner, Antietam, Gettysburg, San Juan Hill. We built friendships and lifelong bonds of freedom in Normandy, Midway, Heartbreak Ridge, Inchon, Hamburger Hill. We fought for overcoming seemingly insurmountable odds and validating our creed in places like La Drang, Mogadishu, Kafji, and Medina. And we fought to root out terrorism for the peace and stability of distant lands in places like Kandahar, Kabul, Baghdad, Fallujah, and Niger. So upwards of 48 million Americans have served for the cause for freedom, and more than 1 million have died to preserve our liberty. Of those million-plus men and women who died to preserve American service, the vast majority are everyday heroes. They're brothers and sisters who fought alongside us and left unfillable holes in their families, communities, and hearts across the country. Their friendship and their bravery and their commitment to duty will never be lost. There are still more than 82,000 military people missing in action from every conflict since World War II. We will never forget them, and we'll never stop looking to bring them home. Since the start of Operation New Dawn in Iraq, and up until today's inherent resolve against the Islamic State of Iraq and Syria, we've lost 6,924 as of the count this morning, service members of all races, genders, and religions over the past 15 years who paid the ultimate price for freedoms that we enjoy back in our homeland today. Our loved ones are not just lost overseas during armed conflicts, but also during peacetime operations and training. In fact, some of you may know we are still mourning the loss of 17 of our fellow sailors out on the USS Fitzgerald and John S. McCain last year off the coast of Japan during peacetime steaming. Alongside the other armed forces, the Coast Guard has suffered some tragic losses, and those who made the ultimate sacrifice as well. So let me see if I can tie these in together for you. The Coast Guard today, we've got 42,000 active duty, about 6,200 reservists that make up our workforce. They stand a vigil over the nation's maritime domain, safeguarding maritime interests on our rivers, securing our ports, protecting our coasts, and high seas sovereignty. The first one I want to talk about is 205 years ago, Seaman John Barber, who was a crewman on a revenue cutter. The revenue cutter service was the precursor to today's Coast Guard. Back in 1813, he was captured by the British Navy off a revenue cutter, and he became our nation's first prisoner of war. He later died on a British prison ship in England, and he became the first Coast Guard, or revenue cutter back then, hero that paid the ultimate price. In World War II, perhaps more well known, we fought alongside the Navy and the Marines. During this time, another Coast Guard hero, Signalman Douglas Monroe, during the Battle of Guadalcanal in '42, distinguished himself evacuating a detachment of Marines that were facing annihilation by enemy forces. Monroe was a coxswain, he was a boat driver, who maneuvered himself and his boat between the Marines as they loaded onto shore on 4 other boats lined up beside him. He succumbed to his sustained fatal wounds, and his last words were, "Did they get off?" Monroe was 22 years old when he gave his life to this nation. He volunteered to evacuate those trapped Marines. He didn't just volunteer, he actually ran his boat directly in between the Japanese pillbox line of fire and the other boats that were landing, and they were able to get those last group of 500 Marines off the beach. If some of you know anything about Douglas Monroe, there's a couple things I would add. One is his mother joined the Coast Guard after he was killed. His mother signed up, and the Coast Guard had what we called spars, which you might remember from the Navy as the waves. or the WACs perhaps. So these are the women that came on the reservist ranks and actually did work stateside while the men were off doing World War II. So his mother signed up after he was killed. The other thing that I would tell you is that among those 500 Marines, and there were others on Guadalcanal, there was many more, were some of the most famous Marines that you know of. Joe Basilone was one of them, Jesse Fuller was one of them. So if you believe in causality, like I believe in causality, you could say that Douglas Monroe saved the future of the Marine Corps in many battles to come by getting those guys off. In the Coast Guard by naming a brand new ship after him that was commissioned last year. It's in Alameda, California, where I came from. A big, beautiful 500-foot ship with 130 people on it. Our headquarters building, probably less glamorously, our headquarters building is named after him, and our enlisted barracks and boot camp is also named after him. So, if I go to Vietnam, Vietnam also saw Coast Guardsmen working alongside the Army primarily. If you go to the Vietnam Veterans Memorial Wall in Washington, D.C. on panel 37 West, line 46, you'll find the name of Roberto Hernandez. He was a fireman aboard the ship named the Point Cypress. That was one of the 16 patrol boats that we had participating in Operation Market Time. In 1968, Hernandez was carrying out a reconnaissance mission supporting the U.S. Army ground forces when he came under intense automatic weapons fire from the Viet Cong bunker ashore. Eventually, his boat was able to evade the ambush and get away, but he was killed from being fatally wounded from the attack. He was posthumously awarded the Purple Heart, Bronze Star Medal with Combat B, and we also just named another replacement brand new patrol boat for him 2 years ago. If you fast forward to the Iraq War, it's most often remembered for its ground combat, the insurgency, which gripped us all as in the fall of, during the time we were overcoming Saddam Hussein and focused on efforts of the coalition troops ashore. There was also another war being waged, an insurgency at sea to the south. In fact, securing those oil terminals at sea to the south was a vital part of that operation to keep the oil flowing and to stabilize the region. One of the Coast Guardsmen tasked to protect those locations was Damage Controlman Nathan Bruckenthal, 3rd class. In 2004, a dhow, which is a type of Arabian vessel at sea, approached the oil terminal, and Bruckenthal had been chosen as one of the tactical law enforcement teams trained to go out and board them and actually resist, keep them away from the oil terminals and keep that safe. On that day, he was accompanied by another Coast Guardsman and 5 sailors on a small rigid hull inflatable boat. They continued forward to a certain small dhow which had not heeded the initial warning to stop, and as they got closer, all hell broke loose. The Iraqis on board must have realized they were going to get caught, and they detonated the explosives they had on board, which were intended to blow up the terminal. The blast blew up the dhow, sent a wave of shrapnel towards the small boat that Bruckenthal was on. He took the brunt of the debris, and the boat was flipped over into the water. 3rd class Bruckenthal, along with 2 U.S. Navy sailors, died of their wounds that day. Their selfless courage protected the crew of the USS Firebolt, which was the ship offshore from which they came, and the offshore oil platform, which was their job. For this action, he was posthumously awarded the Purple Heart, of course, the Bronze Star, and the Global War on Terrorism Expeditionary Medal, plus the 2nd Combat Action Ribbon. He was buried at Arlington National Cemetery. Bruckenthal was the first Coast Guardsman killed in action since the Vietnam War. So if you look at these 4 guys, Barber, Monroe, Hernandez, and Bruckenthal, they represent a legacy of Coast Guardsmen who have made the ultimate sacrifice. They were average Americans, no different than you or me. They enjoyed life, and none of them set out to be a hero, but they were simply performing their duties in service of our nation. But each one of these members chose to fight and to make a deliberate decision to lay down their lives for the common good. Those actions, like the many other military heroes, is what binds us all as members of the armed forces. So as we commemorate this noble American holiday, we honor those who fell in defense of freedom. We honor them in our memory through solemn observances with the love of a grateful nation. I would ask you, when you leave here today, go about the rest of your day, keep the fallen in your minds, and keep their families and friends in your hearts, for it is their immense collective sacrifice that have kept our country safe and free. We owe them a debt of gratitude that can never be paid. So, in closing, I want to thank you all for being here today. for fellowship and celebration. I look forward to continuing to talk to you afterwards and hopefully not mispronouncing your great state process. God bless you all. God bless this great nation. And semper for us.